welcome to a new episode of Eldest Daughter Saves the World. We're so excited you're here to tackle a little bit of life's problems with some humor, some good advice, and just some friendliness. Enjoy! Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Eldest Daughter Saves the World. I'm your host, Coach Laura, and I'm so excited to share today's topic with you. It's something that I've been in a journey on for a while, and I'm excited to share how that's manifested for my own self. And I want to start by kind of telling you some little moments that I've experienced in my life. And maybe you can relate to some of these and maybe not on others. But, I think back to when my kids were little and, you know, I don't know if other moms have had this. I'm sure they have. But you're just looking at this little human being and thinking, oh my gosh, I made that person, right? And their face is perfect and their toes are perfect and their fingers are perfect and they're the cutest thing I've ever seen, right? And I wasn't doing anything special in that moment. I was just looking at my kid. And so, you know, uh, I just love that. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Another example, if you've ever, I'm a huge fan of fall. And if you've ever been just driving and there's a line of trees and they're just gold and red and, just beautiful fall colors, that to me just sends a little bit of happy through me. My friend and I, we always joke that whenever we're on a road trip together and we cross a river or a lake, we are just utterly delighted by a body of water, right? And it doesn't matter what body of water, it could be a really crummy river and we're still excited about it. So what we're talking about today, you may have guessed it here, we're going to be talking about just finding the spiritualism of everyday mundane things, right? And so I think you'll love this topic today. And I hope what you walk away with is some idea of like just how ordinary life can be awesome because we do get caught up in it. And I want to preface this by saying I know a lot of us are just utterly going through it right now, whether it be politically, socially, financially, spiritually, whatever it is, but there are still really beautiful things that we can pay attention to. So let's jump into this a little bit. And I think where some of this comes as such a shock to our system is that we live in a culture where everything is striving for more and everything is waiting, right? We're waiting for think about things in your life that you've said, I'm going to do X when, right? I remember back, and I'm not going to make this whole episode about kids, but I remember, people telling me there's no right or wrong time to have a kid. You are never prepared, no matter when you have that kid. So, but we're trained for that. We're trained to, okay, I have to graduate high school, I go to college, I get a job, I get married, I have a kid, I have another kid, and then I work till retirement, and then, blah, 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 blah. Well, for some of us, for most of us, we're just in that. We didn't choose that. We didn't, want to do that. But even there's a song called Working for the Weekend, right? And a lot of us do that. We are, oh gosh, I'll get to that on the weekend, or when I'm on vacation. Like nothing hurts my heart more than when people have to take a week of their vacation just to get chores around their house done, right? And a lot of people say, well, I'm going to travel when my kids grow up, or when I retire, I'm going to do this. Well, I'm here to say that my mom was a great example of this. And she and my dad were able to do some traveling, but she passed away when she was 64 years old. So all that time that she had planned to travel, she didn't get. And so all of that to say, I want you to think about how these things are showing up in your life. What are you rushing through, right? I use this example all the time. And I promise this is not going to be all about kids. But if you have little kids and they have to go to daycare or some sort of babysitting, it is miserable. because, I finally accepted with my oldest son that our babysitting was not going to look the same every single year, right? Because he started going to preschool and then my mom was available and then she wasn't available. And then I was home part of the time and it looked different his first 5 years of life just because of, circumstances. And so part of me wished away him being little because I kept thinking this will be so much easier when he goes to kindergarten, right? And then the other part of that breaks my heart because those were fun years, right? He was a fun guy. Both my kids were. But when they were little like that, I was so worried about who was going to take care of them and when and getting them here and rushing around and making sure their bag is packed and all that stuff. And then I kind of was waiting for him to grow up so that I could get out of that. So, my own experience with this is that there's just no time like now. I am a person, my husband jokes, they have all those memes that are like, if my wife says I want to do something, I may as well get my shoes on because we're going to do it. And that's me. I get an idea for a project and I'm probably going to the store within the next few minutes and get it because why wait? Why put it off? And my husband is on the opposite end of that. He is a chronic procrastinator. He wants to wait for the conditions, and trust me, he's talked to his therapist about this, but he wants to wait for the conditions to be absolutely perfect before he does something. And I more have the mentality of like, okay, well, let's just jump into it and see how it goes, right? And more often than not, I have not run into an issue doing that, right? Some things do take planning, but some things we just can't continue to wait for because they'll never happen, right? If you say, I want to go do the things, then go do the things, right? Figure it out. And I love that, all those things that are going around online that say, travel and the money will follow. You'll find more money for travel, get more money, you won't get more time back. And that's true, right? And so I try to remember that with, and even with, I talk about my kids, but I also talk about that with our parents, right? And our grandparents. Time is fleeting, and so spending as much time with those people that you love while you can is huge because none of us know what's going on, right? So all of that to say, yes, we have to do our daily things, but sometimes we let the rush kind of overtake us, and that's what we want to avoid doing. So let's talk about what spirituality actually is. And spirituality is very personal, and there is not a right or wrong way to practice anything. And I think that's getting lost right now in the climate of our country. But you know what you feel in your heart. You know how you want to worship if you worship. You know how you want to display your morals and values. You know what you believe and what you don't believe. And so we needed to challenge this idea that spiritual life is only for Sundays or only for the days I go to church, or it's only for the days I sit down and pray, or it's only for days I sit down and, do a spell at my altar, whatever your faith is, right? We have these things that we just need to bring into our daily life, right? So there's lots of quotes and things around that. And I know there's a lot of historical, colonial, and cultural context around some of these things that, I remember my kids and I were actually talking about this not too long ago, but some things were closed on Sundays, right? And when I grew up in middle of the Bible Belt, Indiana, everything was closed on Sunday. Maybe Walmart was open, maybe a restaurant or two that was a chain, but for the most part, things were closed on Sundays. And slowly, I'm not opposed to this, but our society has gone to, people work different schedules. Going into the office 9 to 5 is not a career a career path that everybody has. So, being open 7 days a week or things like that, it kind of changes our view of how we bring spirituality into our life because there's not really a day that culture sets aside for that. And I think that's a wonderful thing for the record. But I think that we have to figure out how do we bring in those little spiritual practices for ourselves. And it pulls us back into the moment most of the time, our spiritual practice does. So if we can sit down and be quiet with our mind for just a moment, feel our body, whatever it is. I own a yoga studio. So for some people, that spiritual practice is coming into lay on their mat and pray during Shavasana, or just have some time to be quiet with themselves. And this can manifest in different ways. I'll share a personal example of this. So I have been really, really, really trying to lean into being grateful, being thankful, because again, we're all in the middle of a dumpster fire and it's hard to find those things sometimes. So, whenever I look at the clock and the numbers are all the same, so 11:11 or 3:33 or some of those kinds of things, I pause and I give a thank you to the universe. And that has really allowed me to just take a moment and be thankful. And to me, it's a little bit of a wink that whatever I'm doing is kind of the right direction. Actually, before I sat down to record this podcast, I checked my phone and it was 1:11. So that's kind of a fun little nod to this, what we're talking about here today. But you need to think about how you can bring that into your daily life. Maybe it's a quote that you put on your office cubicle. Maybe it's a wallpaper that you have on your phone screen. Maybe it's a time that you set aside 15 minutes every morning to sit and read, or whatever your spiritual practice is, making sure that we make some time for that, because again, we don't want to push that off till Sunday, right? Or I'm not spiritual till the weekend, right? We can be spiritual every day, and just helps our soul feel a little more anchored when we can do something like that. So the other thing about being present and finding the mundane beautiful and some of those kinds of things. So we want to start noticing things around us, right? And this is I think kind of a silly example, but like, when someone in your family gets a new car, you never noticed how many of those cars, right, how many red Toyotas are out there until someone in your family gets a red Toyota. And so that's something that we have to kind of train our brain to see that um, you know we just need to notice. And maybe, I do this a lot in my yoga classes, right? I go through the five senses. What's something that you can feel right now? And you can do this along with me if you want to, but what's something you can feel right now? Is it how your clothes are on your body? Is it the air on your skin? What are you feeling? If your eyes are open, what can you see, right? Maybe you can see outside. Maybe you're looking at a wall or something in your home. What can you smell? And it may be nothing, but maybe you have some incense or a candle, or you're cooking, right? So you have some smells. If you're eating something, can you taste something? And then I think the other thing is, what can we hear? And that one is a big one. A lot of times we have the cacophony of, I've shared about my ADHD, so I always have a TV on. It just is. But sometimes when I turn that off, I can hear my kids laughing upstairs, or my dog's playing, or whatever it is. We can stop and notice those kinds of things. But see if there's something that you can start noticing that's just lovely. Maybe while you're doing dishes, you just love the scent of your dish soap. Or maybe you've mopped the floor and your whole house smells like pine sol and it smells amazing, right? Or maybe somebody brought flowers and you can smell them, or, whatever those little things are. Maybe it's just, oh my gosh, this cup of coffee gives me life every morning, right? So just start noticing those beautiful things. And that will also start to slow the pace of your mind and help you to be a little bit more intentional. So that's, we want to notice, we want to kind of bring everything into daily life, and we want to not rush through everything that we're doing. So, with that, I will leave you with all of those things for today. I definitely want you to try and do something this week that just grounds you into where you are right at that moment. Again, maybe it's just listening. Maybe it's, feeling how soft your bed sheets are. Whatever it is, just do something that helps you get to realizing where you are in the day. All right. Well, thank you very much for listening. I will catch you next time. I hope everyone has a wonderful week.